Hey everybody, this is Larry from Great Lakes E-Bikes. Now running a store here, we basically have people coming in every day asking the exact same questions. And it means that nobody's really answering those for people. So what I wanted to do is make this video a nice, compact, easy to watch video where you can get those main questions that almost everybody who's first starting their e-bike search, those questions that they have, I want to get them answered in this video to arm people with the knowledge that they need when they're searching for their first e-bike. So let's get into it. Now the first one might seem obvious, but everyone comes here and asks, well, what's the difference between the fat tires and the skinny tires? And like I said, it might seem like a no-brainer for most, but a lot of people are curious, what is the pros and cons of either, and why would you even want a fat tire, or vice versa? Some people said, who would not want a fat tire? And what it comes down for me, what I tell people, basically, we'll start with fat tires, right? So they are super comfortable. They have those big wheels that absorb almost everything, whether you're just on like a road path or, a rail trail or light gravel, even some off-road scenarios, 2 tracks, all that stuff, fat tires can handle that. So it's kind of that one-size-fits-all bike. That means there's no terrain you can't ride. And even the simple terrain is just a little bit comfortable or more comfortable because you have a fat tire. Sounds great, right? Well, here's the only downside to that is they are very, very heavy. And there's 2 kind of downsides when it comes to a heavier e-bike. The first part is kind of just getting going even. I mean, some fat tires are between 80 and 95 pounds. So getting that heavy of a bike started, you almost always have to use the throttle to get going or really just be in a super light gear and just put your whole everything into it. And that also ties into kind of mobility when you're at that slow speeds and you're trying to weave around places. It can be tough sometimes if you're not, well, I mean, you definitely get used to it over time, but that initial kind of, oh man, what am I doing here, can be kind of scary for some people when it's those bigger bikes. That also means, when you're loading it into vehicles, that can be tough too. That's a lot of weight that you have to get, and oftentimes you'll have to buy a special bike rack just to get it places. And that's where really light e-bikes come in. On the very opposite end of the spectrum, I work with the brands Velectric and Aviton, both great brands, and they offer something called a cruiser bike, right? So something like the Aviton Pace or the Velectric Breeze are lighter bikes that are the exact opposite of fat tire bikes. Those bikes are extremely nimble, super easy to handle, super fun for just kind of weaving around and getting up to speed fast. It's basically the difference between the SUV of a fat tire and a sports car of, a Breeze or a Pace. They're just zippier, they're quicker, easier to maneuver. They're both going to get to that same speed eventually. But let me tell you, these Breezes, these cruisers are going to get there a lot faster. And then there's stuff in between, the 2.5-inch tires to 3-inch tires. They're kind of crossing the line, and it's basically exactly what you'd think. It's right in the middle. So you're gaining a little more weight. You're losing maybe a little of the super easy maneuverability, but you're gaining comfort like you do in the fat tires, where it's super cushy, super plush when you're rolling around. And I already kind of answered it, but while we're here, a lot of people ask, how heavy are e-bikes? And the answer is pretty heavy. So something you should know is in almost every e-bike nowadays, the batteries come out. They weigh between 8 and sometimes 15 pounds. So just keep that in mind if you are loading an e-bike and you see, this is a 60-pound e-bike or whatever. Just know you'll always be able to take that battery out. Even things like taking the seat post out, little things like that help get it to a more liftable weight. But there are bikes that are lighter, like that Pace, and especially the Breeze, I think, is one of the most approachable e-bikes because it's so light. Those are great options for people who maybe have that weight barrier and they know that they're going to be taking their bikes places and they're wanting to, load it in a vehicle or whatever it might be, and they don't want to be lifting a 90-pound fat tire bike. just know there are options out there. So things like the Pace and Breeze are about 40 to 50 pounds. That's really not too bad when you consider all the power it has, all of the capabilities it has. Still being that light is actually really impressive. And then you take a step up to something like Aviton's Level 3, Level 2, Level 3, or the Discover 1 or Discover 2 from Velectric. Now, these are kind of the more advanced cruisers. These are something that's going to have a 2-inch or 2 to 2.5-inch tire, a little more plush, but a little heavier. So great for cruising around, super comfortable at the trade-off of these are right in between. So we're not talking 40, 50 pounds anymore. We're talking about 60, 65 pounds. And they kind of are that perfect medium of everything. So definitely consider that if weight's not too big of an issue, but you're hoping to get something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more comfortable, but not like totally, bare bones like those other two bikes I was talking about, the Breeze and the Pace. At this point, I should also mention I'm definitely going to keep referencing bikes from the brands Velectric and Aviton. I've worked with a ton of brands. If you go check out this YouTube channel, you'll see I've reviewed a bike from almost every brand out there. And I think it says a lot that the bikes I choose to have at my store are Velectric and Aviton. I think they do a great job at what's most important to me is making sure if a customer comes back with an issue of a bike they had, one, that they're even able to fix it for them. We're going to be doing the work, but we're going to be calling the brands to get the parts. And I got to say, Velectric and Aviton, if you're on your e-bike search, consider looking at them first just for their reliability when it comes to working with us dealers. Getting parts is a huge part of the e-bike gang. So many things can happen with all the electrical system. Like, for instance, a controller. It's a part on a bike that goes out very often. And if you are buying some random brand off Amazon or, some other, newer brands out there, let's say, they don't really keep a ton of those parts here in the US, let alone at all. So I'm waiting between, a month to 3 months to help a customer replace a single part. So that is a big reason why I've chosen to work with Velectric and Aviton. Their most common parts, even on their older bikes, they're located in the U.S. at their warehouses, and they can send them to me, usually within a week or two, and I can help a customer get back on the road. So just wanted to state that, and especially if you're thinking, why does he keep bringing up these two brands? That's why I, support those brands. So now we're getting into more of the technical stuff. A lot of people come in asking, do they need a 500 watt or a 750 watt? We don't really see any 350 watt motors anymore, and I try to stay away from the 1,000 watts up, at least here in Michigan. So let me start with the reason why. So in Michigan, to be legally a bike and not a moped, it has to be under 2 horsepower. So in that case, it can't be more than a 750 watt motor, which is plenty of power. Don't let it fool you. It peaks at over 1,000 when, when you're like really pushing it, you have a little more headroom than that 750, even though it is a 750 watt motor. So finding a 750 is just the safest bet for most people. That said, Aviton we've been talking about Aviton a lot of their more popular bikes are 500 watts, and I don't think that's an issue. A lot of them do peak at around 800 watts, so that's still plenty of power for most. You're within legal specs. You're totally able to handle any hill that you throw at it. It's a decent amount of power. So between 500 and 750, there's not a huge trade-off. Now, if you're coming to me and asking, why should you get a 500? Why should you get a 750? What I like to say is if you plan on hauling anything, like for instance, a kid's trailer or a pet trailer or something behind your bike, or you're going to be loading it up, or quite possibly, you're just maybe a heavier rider like myself even, a 750 is probably a better bet. When you finally get to that really steep hill, you're going to be able to handle it without a problem. Now, if you're hauling kids behind you and you're a big rider and you're on a 500 watt and then you finally get to that really steep hill, you're going to find yourself maxing that 500 watt motor out. You'll still get up, but you're going to get up a lot slower than you probably wanted to. So that is, kind of the easiest way for me to answer that for folks. And there's a couple other caveats out there, but it really just comes down to, are you hauling anything other than yourself? And if the answer is yes, or you think maybe even, then go ahead and get a 750. You probably can't go wrong. The next most commonly asked thing is, what is the difference between a Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3? Well, there's not a lot. And if you're asking me, I kind of think these classifications are outdated, and most cities and most states they're doing the best they can for their local trails, but frankly, they just don't make sense for what most people are doing when they're riding these bikes. So I'm going to say what they are, and then I'm going to say what they should be. So basically, a Class 1 means it is a pedal assist bike. That pedal assist is not to exceed 20 miles per hour. That's it. Now, every bike I sell anyways is a Class 2, which is basically just a Class 1 with a throttle. And a throttle is the ability for the bike to ride on its own without a need for pedaling at all. So basically, having a Class 2, you can have a Class 1 if you just take the throttle off. So that way it opens more doors for people. And when we're talking about a Class 3, the only difference in a Class 3 is the ability to go above 20 miles an hour, getting to 28 in fact. And that's what a Class 3 is. And you'll see a lot of trails all over, they'll say we allow Class 1s only. And most of them are saying that. And it's very fair considering what you think a Class 2 is. You see on paper, a Class 2 means they're using throttle only. But the case is most people are just using those pedal assist features. So banning Class 2s when they're not using those features is just causing a nightmare of confusion. And I think it could be solved if we just were able to take our trails and put speed limits on it. Just my kind of 2 cents there, but hey, I don't make the rules. I just sell e-bikes. Okay, we're going to continue down this more technical road and talk about pedal assist. You know, a lot of people come in and say, I'm never going to get an e-bike. I still like pedaling. Well, that's what you're doing on an e-bike mostly. I think that's a very common misconception with e-bikes, in fact, that people say, I don't want to move to an e-bike because, I want to pedal. And they think maybe they're only throttle only, or that, you're pedaling into nothing like it used to be with very, early entry e-bikes back in the day. That was only like 2 or 3 years ago. The short of it, though, is nowadays almost every e-bike we sell comes with what's called a torque sensor. And what that means is they feel just like a normal bike to pedal. It feels super natural, and you're just really adding a little more power if you want more assist. So 90% of your ride is just pedaling, but with help. So here's how I like to say, most bikes have between 4 to some even have 7 pedal assist levels. And what you're doing every time you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, you're setting a max wattage that rear motor is giving you assistance with. So there's a little sensor in the pedals, and it knows how hard you're pedaling. And based on how hard you're pedaling, it's sending a signal to that rear motor to match how much energy you're putting in with the motor up to that max wattage you set it at. So let's say you're on level 2, the most that the bike will do, let's say, is 200 watts. If you're pedaling as hard as you can on level 2, you're only getting 200 watts of help, and that's not a ton. So you're still putting most of the work in. And not only that, if we're talking about brands like Vletric, even Aviton, you can now customize how that pedal sensor feels and even get less assistance or more. If you do want a more torquey, zippy ride where that motor's kicking in really fast and using more power, you can make it do that too. But most people are doing things like eco mode, where you are still like probably doing 90% of the work and just getting like 10% of assistance. So that way you can still feel like you're exercising. You can feel great, go on a long ride. But when it comes to those harder parts of riding a bike, you have help when you need it. And that's what gets people out and gets more people out on the road riding their bikes again. And I mean, I say road, but paths, whatever you want to do. And I love that. That's why we're here. We're trying to get more people out on their bikes, seeing the world again, and e-bikes do that for people. And they really do. I have 100 stories that just would blow your mind of people getting a whole new life because of their e-bike. And I love hearing it. So I know we kept things very basic here, but we did that for a reason. I want this to be one of the first videos that people watch when they're considering buying an e-bike. And hopefully we did that today. I have a ton more videos that get into more of the technical things, and we can do that another day. Thank you guys for watching. And if you're in the Grand Rapids area, come in and test ride an e-bike. That's literally what we're here for, is like just, any one of these are available to take for a spin. So come down whenever and, feel what it's like to ride an e-bike. And I can go over all the questions that you have here too in person. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye now.